All right. Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing today? I hope you guys are having a good Sunday. Just turned the gain down, so hopefully the audio is coming in nice and clear. Nothing too abrasive, audibly speaking. And let me go ahead and take this banner off. That was Second Chances, my one single track from 2023. I have a queue of single tracks I'd like to release, but I've run into some difficulties as far as mixing and mastering. Not so much the electronic instruments themselves, but how to match it with an acoustic instrument like the violin. And so I'm probably going to put those aside and try to release an album, like an actual full length album of a different style of music. So um, working on that. Been composing. Not so much this week. We had a pretty busy week, but yeah, we're doing good. I'm I will say I'm happy to be here. I'm a little sleepy today, so we'll see how that goes. But usually I get a little bit of this. I don't know if you stream yourselves, um, but sometimes some people get like on kind of a kick, like an energy boost, just being on stream, being on the air, which is kind of nice. So we will start with that, and we are talking about writing. And yeah, I guess I can say it from a writer's perspective because I experience it myself, what I'm about to talk about this week or today. But this is more, whatever I have to say is really coming from the reader's perspective, because I like to read as much as I can as well as write as much as I can. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get into the chat. And we did see, I think Brian Gilmartin is first. And he asks, inferiority? I wonder what this can mean. Well, I feel like character inferiority might be a whole different set of rules, a whole different game. But no, I'm going to be talking about interiority, which is actually a hard word to spell, at least for me. I had to make sure I was spelling it correctly a few times. So by character interiority, we are talking about the inner dialogue. It could be maybe an actual version of dialogue, except in the person's mind, in the person's perspective, or the simple narrative that is the person thinking. So nothing really external, except for maybe reacting to different things. So it should be pretty fun. I like talking about this kind of stuff. I do have notes this time. So what I'll do is after welcoming the chat, I'll get straight to my notes and then we can talk amongst ourselves. So got that. We have, so Brian, welcome. We've got Ghost Planet Max Inc. 1.0. You are welcome too. It's good to see you. You're saying hi to everyone. My wonderful prof and channel member of 4 channel members. Music sounds great. Well, thank you, my prof. I'm glad. And also audio sounds great. Good. Even better. I never really worry about the music. I feel like the music sounds good on its own. Dr. Y, it's so good to see you. It's been a while since I've seen you on my streams. I see you all the time on prof streams or maybe once in a blue moon when Fan Man has a stream. But you say aloha. I finally get to listen to one of your Sunday streams. Okay, yeah, maybe it's because Sunday is not the best time for everyone. Yeah, that's totally acceptable. All right. Brian, you say it's been a pretty dreary day on your end, so moving between drawing and playing games. That's good. Yeah, after the stream, I'm going to go on a little walk, just to, empty out my mind because I've been. I'll tell you this. I had a. It was a different day for Prof and me yesterday because we had Alyssa for not really the whole day, but an extension of Saturday before he dropped her off to see her mom, and I was kind of just in the zone, like, okay, so Alyssa's hanging out, just waiting to go to see her mom, and then I'm like, well, I'll just. I usually clean right after that, but I had to wait, so I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna write, and I wrote, I think, about 1,000 words, maybe between 900 and 1,000 words last night or yesterday, and you'd think that sounds productive because it does sound productive. I should be happy about it, and I sort of am happy, but it looks to me like I It's one of those writing stints where I'm thinking, I feel like with this new stuff, with this new material, I'm either writing a scene where it's either worsening the plot or it needs to be salvaged for another part of the story or another part of the timeline. Because how I have it right now in the narrative is not making too much sense. I mean, there's a logical flow to it, but it's not as good as it could be. I'm missing something. There's something I'm not tapping into. And so that's my brain was crowded last night just trying to think, "Oh, what am I missing?" And sometimes when I write 1,000 words, it feels so good. This unusual time when I did write almost 1,000 words, I'm thinking, I think I'm just gonna salvage probably like 550 of it, 550 words. But anywho, that was my day yesterday, which is not a bad day, but I feel like it could have been a little bit better. Samuel Proctor says this the topic for this chat is really welcome Samuel, by the way, is really coincidentally timed. I just rewatched Spider-Man 3 in the theater and noticed all kinds of examples badly badly written character interiority. I would say with film, it's a whole other can of worms. So if you guys have examples for film, that's a good idea. I'm going to be speaking really from a reader's perspective in the novel form or the written word. But yeah, film examples are totally welcome. And actually, to be honest, any bullet points that I may make probably could be applied in some way to film. And think like watch out, things to watch out for. All right. Big Al presents. Good to see you. Hello. I'm thinking of Jerry Seinfeld right now. Hello. No, how did he do it? He did this voice that annoyed his girlfriend before she broke up with him. Uh, oh, so Brian, you do say you must have misread the thumbnail. Yeah, that font isn't the best font, but I couldn't find a better font with the time given. Lynn Green says, have a great stream. Thank you so much. You'll check it out in the morning. Good. Well, I will catch you on the replay. All right. Let's see. Yes. Oh my gosh, I gotta put this up. I saw that this morning or this afternoon. Yeah. Yeah. King Théoden, Bernard Hill, he passed away at 79. Um, I remember seeing him. I only know him for his role as Théoden. I'm sure he's been involved in other film projects. I think he okay, I have to admit something. If you know me, you must know I have not watched any classic films, and Titanic is one of those films, and I think he was part of that movie too, but I remember him as King Theoden always, and I remember seeing behind the scenes, he was such a goofball, like, he was like, people on the set called him, like, a big kid because he's kind of a prankster and just always made sure to have fun. So, yeah, that was a little sad, I but, yeah, oh well, King Théoden. I'm glad he's known for a really good role. I mean, if you as actors and actresses, if you wanna it will obviously, life is short, so we'll eventually pass away, but if before you pass away, you wanna be known for a good role, and I think Bernard Hill, uh, had that going for him, so that's great. Alright. Dr. Y, you say your church had a special luncheon today, so the pastor canceled the evening service. Oh, so you go to church in the evening as well. Okay, so you go to the evening service. That makes sense. Yeah. Oh, so he was captain of the Titanic. I remember seeing that one scene where he's like calling other people cowards before like the boats flee the sinking ship. All right. Okay, so Samuel Proctor says to clarify, my by interiority, you mean there are things the characters just know for some reason when there's no reason for them to know them. Oh yeah, that's actually, by the way, that might kind of come to one of my points. I have some bullet points, the do's and don'ts. We'll start with the don'ts, by the way. Um, yeah, no, 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 that's important. Like, if there's no reason for a character to know something, a knowledge gap is perfect. I don't know if knowledge gap, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit into the notes, but if you've never heard of knowledge gap, I don't know if it's a very popular term, but I remember hearing it by James Scott Bell, who, if you read some of his books on writing, to be honest. I can't remember the title of 2 books I read of his, but James Scott Bell is the name, and he talked about knowledge gap and how a character not knowing something really can up the tension. Like, why is this world this way? Why are these characters behaving this way? Is there something I should know that I don't? And so when a character knows something that they have no reason to know, by way of maybe them being from a different planet or different part of the world, different language, culture, whatever, then yeah, that doesn't make sense. Characters are in their fictional universe, they are real people, so they're limited to knowledge as you and I are limited to knowledge. So anyway, yeah, that's good. By the way, I forgot to say, I'm not, if I didn't say before, because I'm a little sleepy, I'm not working with camera today. We've been having thunder showers throughout the week, and so the camera's been a little spotty. So no camera today, but we'll get back into camera when the storms clear up. We're supposed to have like a whole week of thunder showers, so yeah, it should be pretty spotty at least until the next week. It's been nice and cool though today. We had I wouldn't call it a cold front, but it's been nice. It's been like in the mid 50s. It's been wonderful. All right. So we are 17 minutes in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step away, not from you guys, but I'm going to get out of StreamYard, not physically or locationally, but I'm going to have my notes in front of me. That's what I meant. And so if audio if the audio cuts out or whatever, I'm gonna be reading notes, so I will just trust my husband to come into the room. I'll come back to the chat just to see if everything's good, but let me pull up my notes. And so what I have for character interiority or inner dialogue, I have the do's and don'ts on character interiority or when the character thinks. And I've got bullet points. We're going to start with the don'ts first. And I've got about 4 of them, like 3 major ones. And then I have the do's. So I want to start with the don'ts, like, avoid this if you're a writer. You may pick this up when you're a reader. I find that, when people say in the YouTube sphere, in the YouTube scene, they say, "I have to read bad stuff so I know what not to do." And it's funny because the more you read or watch film, you'll pick up what's bad. Even if you go into a book or go into a series expecting it to be good because of popularity or the author is famous, whatever the case is, you'll go into a series and the more you read, and the more you start analyzing, well, first of all, the more you read, the more you're gonna compare what's good and what's not good. And actually, I'm speaking from recent experience. I'm in the process of reading 2 books. One, as far as character interiority, is great. The other one, I'm actually just going through, just so I can say to people, "I've read this book." I'm not going to mention the book today because I'm actually halfway into both of these books. And the contrast as far as the inner dialogue is quite stark. And so I'm going through the do's and I'm going through the don'ts. So let's start with the don'ts. I'm going to grab water real quick and just have this lecture, and then we'll get back into the chat. So this is for you writers out there, or if you're watching out for some reading, if you're thinking critically or reading critically. It's very important to enjoy a book, but also critically engage, if this is a good book or if this is a good plot, a good structure, good writing. So let's start with the don'ts. So again, the do's and don'ts on character interiority, or what the character's thinking, the internal perspective. The don'ts. So the first don't is what I call the laundry list. And I did realize when I wrote this down that this could also be used for dialogue, but we are working with characters, the character's inner perspective, first person, third person, what have you. So the first don't is the laundry list. And this has to do with putting in too many details. So unless it's a court case or unless it's a scenario where every detail absolutely matters. Every detail in the timeline, every detail in the place, unless it's a court case or something where every detail does matter to resolve the plot, just go ahead and leave it out. And I want to say from experience, even from speaking, women tend to have this problem a lot more than men. In fact, I don't really hear men, and when they're speaking, I don't hear them have this problem unless it's a young man, like, approaching 20 or in his early 20s, and he's still working out how to speak. And you know, I'm I'm close to 40, and I still have this problem, and I think it's a woman problem. So what is this problem that women have when speaking? When we tell a story usually, if you've noticed that men are in a lot of cases, men are better storytellers is because men don't really include unnecessary details if you hear them speak or tell a story. And it's the case with novel writing as well, even though this particular author is very bad at it and he is a man. But when you tell a story, you you need to cut the fat out, and when you're telling a story, whether it's actually the verb or the verbal or the written word, women, when they speak, they put in unnecessary details like, "Oh, yes, I ran into my friend at the grocery store." Perfect. Okay, the plot, you got your setting. That was Friday, or was it Thursday? Now, I have a bad habit of saying that, like, "Oh, yeah, I talked to my sister on the phone Friday," or, "No, no, I think it was Thursday. No, you know what? It was Wednesday night." That doesn't matter. Again, unless you're talking about, an alibi or, solving a murder case, when it happens, exactly, if it's whether it's Thursday or Wednesday, it doesn't matter. And the pace when you're speaking this way and writing this way can really slow down the listener's experience or the reader's experience. So, you know, the laundry list is a very practical tool to have when you're maybe a mother of 4 children and you just have to get the details right. I have, my grandparents. My mother was okay, but my grandparents, especially my grandmother, my aunt, really good with detail. They just knew how to do everything to the minute detail. But in terms of storytelling and plot, you have to ask yourself the question, does this detail really matter in the story? Because if it doesn't, the storytelling will start getting quite clunky and choppy, and you don't want to slow the reader down unintentionally. So, details need to be essential to the plot, to the character, or to the world or world building. So, one example is in the experience where the character is eating food, does it really matter what the food tastes like? Or does it really matter if it tastes bad? Are you going to get into the minute details of how horrible this food tastes? Now, usually no, like, okay, the food tastes bad. The breakfast was awful. The snack was sour, whatever the case is. Just, be very concise with that. But if you're getting into the minute details of the act of eating, it's got to be essential to the plot. So how can that be? What can you do with that? Well, in the way of eating, what if your main character is eating an alien food just for the sake of surviving? Like if you don't eat this sustenance, you could perish, you could die, you could starve. But then the character comes like as the character's trying to comprehend, what does this taste like? Why does it sound familiar? Or why does it taste familiar? Why do I feel weird about eating this food? And then maybe that person comes to the realization that he's eating something forbidden, or it could be in the form he's eating in the way of being a cannibal, cannibalization. So the experience of eating a type of food could be absolutely meaningless in the way of the plot or absolutely essential. So if you find out you're eating a foreign piece of food and then you realize you're eating a body of some maybe a human character or humanoid character and you're repulsed by that. You realize you're chewing something and the act of cannibalism is just totally impressed upon you, and now you've run into a moral quandary about the whole thing. That's where it matters because that is an essential character moment of realizing, "Oh, I've got the choice of starving, but keeping my conscience, or surviving, but I only have this food to eat." If it's just a bad breakfast and your character's just having a moody day, it's like, well, okay, that's the mundane. Is it really meaningful for us to know that you had a bad breakfast? So you mind the details. If the details are important and essential to the plot or to the character, that's one thing. But other than that, the details should be left out. Really be careful that the details do not worsen your plot or any characterizations. So, in my experience with this book I'm reading, it's a fairly well known book. I'm not going to say what it is yet, not until I finish it. Did with the details involving the story, this author has unintentionally made the character more dislikable or more disagreeable because details in his inner dialogue and his perspective, this character who I'm really supposed to like because he's an admirable character in other stories. um, uh, he's become so petty with these details. He's become so he complains a lot. He's whiny. Am I supposed to relate to his misfortunes? That's one thing. Yeah, I want to relate to this man's misfortunes, but the details are so inundating where I feel like, okay, he's being petty with everything. He's seeking conflict with absolutely everything. And maybe this writer was thinking, wow, this would be a really good reaction in a play or in a film. I get it, but it's like you're making me annoyed with the character because of all these little tiny details that are not propelling the plot. It's not moving the plot forward. So in my case, this novel I'm reading has details that are, worsening the character even more, and I'm afraid to say this, but this is a prequel novel that I'm reading, and some of the details are actually, I guess, it's trying to make the world building a lot more interesting about this place, this planet, but it's actually breaking world building of previous novels and, novels that take place in the future. And it's supposed to be a very like a reason a pretty pivotal thing for the world building, and these little tiny details are actually breaking the world building, and so that's one thing to watch out for. Are your details moving the plot forward, and are they improving? Are they bettering the overall world building or characterization, of a person, of a place, of an idea? And if that's not the case, leave the details out. So in the end, doesn't matter. That's the question you need to ask. Is this a detail you should include or you should leave out? So that's the first don't. That's the laundry list. You could probably include this for dialogue, but definitely in the character's perspective. Just keep moving the plot forward. Don't make your characters disagreeable with petty details, and move on. So that's the first one, the laundry list. The second one is something I'm gonna call, quote, that's not a quote, "I repeat, therefore I am." And this is the author with repetition. I start to wonder if the author is trying to affirm the main character in unnecessary ways. Like affirm the characters going through the experience, going through the emotions, like I don't believe it. And so where we run into trouble with repetition is the character's inner dialogue, the character's interiority should not match or repeat an external dialogue with other characters. You can, but it has to be done in a good way. So it's one thing for the reader to have a knowledge gap. It's one thing for the character to have a knowledge gap, meaning the reader must know something and something coming up. It's a whole other thing when the reader knows what's what, and then it's represented either to the character again or to other characters. So the character, an example is a character learning something along with the reader, and then it's repackaged in a conversation verbatim. This can really slow the reading experience down. What you can have is a conversation, but the scenario, a conversation that repeats what the main character's thinking, but it must be a different scenario, entirely different language, different words, and it has to move the plot forward. So the words outside the character's inner space, the words have to be different. The personality has to be different. Details have to be different. Reactions have to be different. So in short, the character dialogue should not, sorry, excuse me, I read that wrong. The external dialogue should not be a rehashing of what the reader already knows or what the character already knows. So avoid repetition, or if you are repeating, a character's perspective in a new way, it's gotta quicken the pace. It's gotta move the plot forward. So that is the second thing. The third thing is what I call the writer ruminating. So the writer almost thinking out loud as he's writing the story. So I gotta ask you this question, you readers and writers out there. Have you ever read a book where it feels like the author is just working out the story as he goes? This is my current experience with one of the stories, the books I'm reading, where in the character's interiority, on the surface, it looks like the character is working out something logically, but when it drags on, it gives me the impression that the author doesn't want the reader to catch any plot holes. So, like the inner dialogue is like, oh, maybe it's this, or maybe it can't be that because the weather or the climate is this way, or maybe it can't be that because the culture is this way. And it's like, well, like stop it, like have some action. No guesswork that drags out too long with the character, because it makes me think you're just spelling all this out and ruling all this out so readers won't, you know find a snag in the plot, like, "Oh, that's a plot hole." And I'm gonna say take the following advice with a grain of salt. Don't worry. When it comes to your writing, don't worry about every single possible plot hole. And if you are worried about any plot hole, work it out in an outline. Don't work it out in your draft. Don't work it out in your second or third edit, whatever the case is. Um, when the character's thinking of something in this, bullet point list, like, okay, it's happening here. It must be this. No, it's about that. No, it's happening here. Oh, no, it can't be that. It's like, no, no, don't. I don't want. I don't want to think. I don't want to read like you're thinking like that. It really slows down the reading experience, probably the writing experience too. So, that's one thing I don't like as a reader is when I'm seeing the character thinking and the character's figuring it out for the author. So if you're a writer out there, don't have this kind of expository inner dialogue that really slows down the pace. And I would say maybe don't even have that with external dialogue between characters. I think it can be done. I've seen it done. I've seen it done poorly. It's still clunky, it's still choppy, but the scenario looks better. Like, if you're working out a plot while confronting, like in the form of discourse or an argument between characters, it's so much better when it's, uh, reiterated between people and different personalities. I've still experienced it done poorly between characters, but it is much better than seeing it in an inner dialogue. All right, last, the fourth don't, and it's really quite short, and that is contradiction. Does the character's interiority contradict his actions and dialogue? Now, if so, there could be reasons for that. Is there a change of heart? Is the character changing his mind? Or is there something nefarious? Like, if there's a nefarious influence taking hold of the person's psychology, that can work really well with something like sci-fi, speculative fiction, fantasy. Like, is the person maybe brainwashed and they don't remember something? So all of that can be explored, but if there is a contradiction, it has to make sense. So if the character's thinking something differently from his actions or speaking, why? What's causing that? And if the contradiction is a bad one, then just make sure there's no contradiction. All right, so those are the don'ts. Uh, Number one, the laundry list of details. Number two, constant repetition where it's not necessary. Number three, the writer or the author ruminating and trying to figure things out as he goes in the story. And then number four, contradiction. Is it a good reason to have this contradiction, or is it just lazy? All right, let's check. Just make sure everything looks good. All right, good. All right, let's continue with my notes. Okay, now for the do's. So the do's for character interiority, and I've got. I think it's not a shorter list, but yeah, I think it's a little more concise. Um, so what to do with a character's inner dialogue, a character's interiority? Number one, work with characterization. So can the character's inner dialogue have its own unique characterization? Does it sound different from the character's dialogue and actions? That's not to do with a contradiction. Um, it could be its own personality, like in the form of um, maybe the perspective of a character has its own personality, like your subconscious is working, and especially with speculative fiction and sci-fi, there have been examples where the subconscious has its own personality. A great example is Dr. Morbius from Forbidden Planet. He doesn't know really until the final climax of the movie that all the chaos that's ensuing around, um, the astronauts, the explorers' base, and then also his own home with his daughter. He doesn't know all the chaos is happening because his subconscious mind had been heightened, like the id. I love, like, especially with the character's inner dialogue, if there is some nefarious influence or if there's like a good, magical thing happening where the subconscious is working against the character. Like, okay, why am I thinking this? Why do I have seemingly two thoughts that contradict, but the reason behind it has to be a good one. So have some characterization. Also, characterization is like there's a natural voice inside the character that more or less aligns with the speaking. So this is great for when you have a main protagonist and then an antagonist. They're going to speak differently, obviously, because they have different, maybe different goals, different personalities. So if someone is stoic, the inner dialogue is going to have that kind of language. If someone is effervescent or bubbly, that inner dialogue is going to be with a lot of exclamation points and stuff like that. So, characterization, how can you characterize the perspective of the character? Does it line up? Is there more of a contradiction, maybe going on with the subconscious or even the unconscious? I need to go back to this novel I wrote many years ago, dealing with the perspective, dealing with the speculative, and it does deal with the id. And can the subconscious have its own fortitude, residing in the character, but kind of almost having a mind of its own. So work with characterization. I think that makes it a lot more. I would say it can really thicken the plot if you have a type of personality for the inner dialogue. Um, let's see. Going down my notes, I sort of skipped a few. One thing that you can also work with in terms of characterization is not so much the personality of something like the subconscious, but does the character with the inner perspective, does the character drum up images that aren't really there in that person's reality, but the characterization is a good one. So for instance, how does a character see a stoic superior, like a boss who just has no personality? Well, one thing you can drum up as an image is like a gray statue, like this someone who doesn't move, someone who could be intimidating and somber, and you kind of want to spend as few minutes with them as possible, like a very stoic gray statue. So there's a characterization of maybe a person that might not be that person in real life, but the person inside, thinking is like, man, he's as still as a statue. He's kind of scary or something like that. Maybe it's a lovely young woman and the person describes her as nymph like. Maybe the woman doesn't see herself as nymph like, but you can create a little personality with that image. So I think characterization in one context or another is really, really important. Um, so that's the first do, characterization. The second one I think is really important, and that is thinking on your feet. And I have only this to say: the inner dialogue has to be firing rounds, and the reader is engaged. So this is more for action scenes, or where the person just has to think on their feet very, very quickly, and so there's no room for a back and forth dialogue. Like, I got to do this. No, I can't do that. I got to do this. No, it's like, okay, I'm doing this. I've made up my mind, and proceed with the course of action. So that's the second do, is how active can your thinking be, and can you act on the spot? So yes, think on your feet. The third do I would recommend is what I call the influence. Is there something about the world or other characters actively changing the psychology of the character? Does the character even know what's happening? Or if they are aware, do they fully understand it? Can they navigate it in time to prevent themselves from changing for the worse? A great example is one I'm actually reading right now, and that is the EU book Shatterpoint by Matthew Stover, involving Jedi Master Mace Windu. And now, no spoilers because I'm only halfway there, but so far in the story, and this isn't spoiling anything, Windu has to contend with this mysterious jungle, this area that is really mysterious. There's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of dark energy that he, at least where I'm in the book right now, he cannot mentally or emotionally figure out. He's very confused by what he calls blood fever, where he has this rage that he cannot understand himself feeling. He starts doing and thinking things, or really he's controlling himself as best as he can in the book right now, but he starts to think things that he knows his former self at Coruscant would not do. And so this is beautiful engagement with the internal dialogue. He's facing absolute moral questions, like dire moral questions, like, I'm about to do something I can't do. I'm a Jedi master. Why am I feeling these things I'm feeling in this mysterious jungle? So I call that the influence. Is there something? Is there a place? Is there an idea? Is there a ritual? Is there a person? Is there a character who is actively changing the psychology of the main character? And lastly, building tension. If there isn't action in the plot, is the character's interiority building tension in some way? Will the character cause a reaction based on what he or she is thinking? How will she react to different, or how will he react to different things? And so, if you're not in the thick of it, if in the way of action scenes, the character's interiority can really move the plot forward. Okay, the character's thinking this. How are other people going to respond to this if they have control of the situation? Lots of opportunity, excuse me, opportunities for uh, antagonism, you know, conflict. So just because you're not in actual action, like running away from something, or protecting yourself from an explosion or a fight or whatever, you can still have a lot of good tension and mystery with just the character's interiority. So, reviewing real quick the list of do's and don'ts, starting with the don'ts. Uh, avoid the laundry list of details, avoid repetition, avoid working out your plot and structure as the story goes. Like, don't leave it in your final draft. And then avoid contradiction unless it's really good to the plot, unless it really works well in the plot. And as far as the do's, figure out some characterization. How can your character's inner dialogue have its own voice? Whether it's a natural response of the character themselves, or maybe it's something a little bit more on the meta tier, like something with the subconscious. Also, one thing to do with the character's inner dialogue is thinking on your feet. So the character is a very fast thinker. It has a wit to them. The third thing, influence. What could be influencing the character's psychology in the plot of the story? And lastly, build tension with the character's perspective. And those are the ingredients to avoid or include for a very good plot, for a very good story. All right, let's go back into the chat and see. We got a lot of people talking. That's good. All right, great. All right, let me grab some water real quick. I see Ace is in the house. Good. Good to have you. And Final Fantasy, also good to see you. And I think that's good. Awesome. Great. And Aloise. Wonderful. Okay. Good to have all of you guys. Where should we start? Yeah. So Brian says, I'm assuming interiority, you mean the character's inner thoughts. Exactly. All right. Scrolling on down. Samuel Proctor wants to clarify that Spider-Man 3 is just a mess. A fun, nostalgic mess, but a mess nonetheless. Brian also says that you don't have to witness bad art to know what doesn't work. I mean, just just exposing yourself to all kinds of art. You're gonna have ups and downs. You're gonna have, A tier and D tier pieces of art. Like you don't even intend to, go like people say, "Well, no, I gotta read a bad fiction. I've gotta watch a bad film." It's like, you don't actually have to. Good films, bad films, they're gonna come your way without any planning to see a bad film or read a bad novel. It just happens. But you can't really make that comparison truly until you've watched a lot of films or read a lot of books, from the same writers, from different writers. I mean, I do have favorite writers. I will say though, man, some of the works are A tier, some of the works are absolute like, oh man, what happened to you? That's been my experience. So yeah, so Brian also confirms that just finding something that's good will be enough to teach you that, yeah, what is good. Yeah, that is right. Dr. Y says, "Good grief, that sounds like me." The laundry list. Hey, all the stuff that I listed just now, I'm experiencing myself. Like, I have to make sure, okay, do these details matter? If not, then is it worsening the plot? Is it worsening the characterization? If it is, I gotta leave it out. But I think that one of the more important ones is from just my own experience writing and then also reading is the writer working out the like, you know, filling all those plot holes in the road in the story. And it's really bad. When I'm reading it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is like 2.5 pages that really should just be an action scene that requires one paragraph. It's horrible, and it's making the character look really passive. This character I'm supposed to like is like, "Oh, man, you're such a whiny, petty, passive character. Everything bad happens to you." And I know there's gonna be a climactic moment where it's like, "Aha, eureka." I know it's coming, but it's like, I'm already on page 250. The eureka moment needed to come like 100 pages ago. Brian also says, "I've made a habit of coming up with quick and dirty explanations for otherwise complex things, mostly because I hate people who bloviate." Yeah, bloviate's a great word. I didn't know it until someone trolled me. Like bloviate. What does that mean? Yeah, because I hate it when people bloviate. Let the other person ask before you elaborate further. Yeah. I think and I made mention of this before. I think it's a really important one because I deal with it. Like actually, my husband deals with it way more. Professor Geek, my wonderful professional editor, writer, husband, poor soul. Um, Sometimes I don't finish my thoughts. Sometimes I don't finish my sentence. I'll say a sentence halfway and then I stop because I have another thought coming in. And sometimes when I talk, I just add details like this doesn't matter. I think there's a I don't know who the comedian is, but like Prof knows this comedian who was like the car like the man is in his car with his wife and then the wife accuses him of not listening. He's like, "Oh, I listened." She's like, "Really? What did I say?" "Everything! You said all the things that you could possibly say." And I feel like that's me. All right. Brian Gilmartin says on the food example, you would include the scenario where it doesn't taste right and possibly poisoned. The food is poisoned. Yeah. Oh, I can't read The Matrix yet because I haven't watched The Matrix. It's so sad. I've seen like scenes of movies, but I haven't really seen movies. So yeah, I've got my whole life watching the classic movies. Like I never really honestly have to just by my own disposition, being who I am, not having watched major films, I don't need to watch the new stuff because I still have to watch all the old stuff. I have watched scenes in The Matrix. I saw the ending. I've seen different scenes, but just not in the whole context. And it's terrible because I like science fiction and people say it's a great sci-fi piece of work. So I gotta go watch it. Brian says ruminating sounds like a writer who likes to hear himself or herself talk. Yeah. And you say, you quote, I repeat, therefore I am. In other words, writers who prefer to tell instead of show. Um, I don't mind telling. I think telling's fine. I just don't like a presenting of what's been told. So as soon as a protagonist excuse me, sorry. I was in the middle of a yawn, believe it or not. As soon as a protagonist understands something about the world around them, and thereby the reader understanding, then if it's represented, if it's repackaged again, it needs to be something that is maybe recalled later in the plot, or it's going to any new representation of that information should be to provoke a reaction of another character or another part of the world. So, like, okay, this character knows something. How is the world going to respond with this knowledge? That's where it's good. But this book I'm reading, oh my goodness! Like, there's a scenario that happens, and then it's three characters fighting each other. Like, oh, the whole point is for one of the characters to just contradict everything the other person is saying, and it's like, oh, this isn't this isn't Aristotle or Plato with some sophistry going on, where some sophist is contradicting everything they say. It's so annoying. It's like I get it. I know what happened. I don't have the reader relive the scene in a form of dialogue. It's gotta be a reaction to propel the plot forward. It can't be characters like, a very simple trick is, okay, character A knows what has happened based on this experience. Character A tells other characters, B and C and D, everything they know. And that's just one line. Like, she explained everything to them without the actual explanation because the reader knows. Then you get the reaction in line 2, you know? So, Dave and his death beanie. Nice to see you. Never seen you before. Welcome. All right. continue on. You also so Brian says, brave characters should have brave thoughts, kind characters should have kind thoughts, fearful characters should have fearful thoughts. In other words, pick a lane and stay in it. Yeah. I mean, unless there's again, I agree. So the inner dialogue should be naturally more or less in conjunction with the outer dialogue. Unless there's an external influence working against that character. Or it could be something like a personality split, a split in personality. Like there's I mean, one of these days. I sort of did work on it with my speculative novel, but working with the shadow. Like um, you know, really good presentations of the light character and the shadow character. Like, I mean, sometimes it is 2 characters, like within, Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes, Will is the light side, he's the good character. Jim is, Will what was his last name? Nightshade was Jim's name, um, and, he was the shadow character. Of the 2 boys coming of age, he was the shadow character. But I love an integration of, a shadow character within the person. It was such a long, really absurd book, but I read many years ago, Macroscope by Piers Anthony. It had very interesting ideas, but it was kind of almost an anthology of events involving the same characters. There were some good moments, really good moments. Um, but the main antagonist was this mystery for until the very end, and then the very end, the scene was pretty interesting. It was actually a really dramatic ending, and I'm like, "Man, I wish this was incorporated much earlier in the book because it was like 500 or so pages, and I'm like, "Wow, this could have been, like, page 300," and then maybe an evolution of that dramatic scene, but it was the end. It was the final act, Macroscope. Um, Piers Anthony, I think is his name. I read it many years ago, like over 12 years ago, and, I remember being it was my first, introduction to the shadow. It was a very interesting use of a very timid character who actually was really it was just done really well. It was actually it had a lot of not lot it didn't have a lot, but it actually did have, racial tension that was very interesting. It was a very timid, mixed character, and then, involving a girl, a redhead he really started liking, but she didn't like him, and at first it was dealing with her psychology because she based on a tragic event as a young girl involving a black man, she didn't know she was prejudiced against, black people or mixed people, and then she came to terms with that. I'm like, "Oh, I didn't," because it was buried, it was, like, repressed in her brain, that a really scary incident happened where actually, a black man was trying to save her, but she thought because she was so small, she thought he was about to get her and snatch her up, and, but then it was an integration of this timid man, of his shadow, and the woman, the female the redhead, she confronts his shadow in a very dramatic way, I remember, and, then the protagonist defeats his shadow self, and he gets shy again, and she's so mad at him. She's like, "Oh, come on," and she's like she slaps him and saying, I don't wanna put up with you anymore," 'cause he's back to being his shy self, and then he she turns away, and then he kinda sees her backside, and he's like, "Come here, woman," and then she stops because she's instantly attracted, and so she overcomes her prejudice, her repressed prejudice, and then he's integrated his shadow in a positive way, like, he's more assertive, and he's, like, saying, "Come here, woman," and then at the end, they kiss, and that was the end. It was really great. It was my first introduction of, working with the shadow. So, Ghost Planet says, "Yes, Forbidden Planet." That's the one film, that should show as a, uh, sci-fi classic movie. Yeah. Older sci-fi stuff is really scary. It's very thought-provoking. Um I love the story behind Forbidden Planet. I don't need a retelling of it either because it's so beautifully done. That film is so perfectly done. There doesn't need to be a remake of Forbidden Planet. In fact, I wouldn't watch it because there's something incredibly pulp atomic punk sci-fi that you just don't wanna get rid of. Like, keep it in the collective conscious if you can. Asa says, "The only positive to bad art existing is it makes someone think, if a piece of trash like this can get released, then I can make something better." I think so. That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, I've said, many thoughts about bad art on my streams, but I'm not like, "Oh, we gotta ban bad art." No, it's there to exist. Just make good art in reaction to it. My professor said, "You're worth listening to every word, my love." I feel a little bit more focused when I talk on a stream or when I'm teaching, but man, when it's just me talking with someone else, like in a kitchen or in a living room, it's like I can have yeah. I sometimes that don't make sense. Sometimes I self-edit my speaking. Um, you say Ghost Planet says, "A Trip to the Moon is a beautiful silent black and white film. It's considered the first sci-fi movie." Oh, you mean the actual trip. It uses stop motion and camera tricks. The moon is creepy in it. Are you talking about the actual visit to the moon? Um, yeah. It's crazy to think that after all these decades, we still haven't really walked on the moon after that. Like a couple trips and then we're yeah, it's interesting. We had that great was it 10 years ago or so? We had that great jump. It wasn't a lunar, it wasn't anything cislunar, but it was above the atmosphere. I forgot, like, the space jump where I forgot the jumper's name, but, I saw it live, and I had to go to school. I was a graduate student at the time, and I had to walk 2 miles to the school, and I was like, "Oh, man, I might be late for class. I might just watch this." I don't watch it on my phone. I don't think I did internet on my phone at the time. I think it was all on my laptop. Um, but I cried, like, it was like, "Whoa," and then he beat the, record he beat the sound barrier because he was falling so fast, and I was like, "That's super cool." Dr. Weiss says, "Don't feel bad, Sound Engraver. I haven't watched any of the Matrix movies either." I mean, I'm fine with just watching the first one. I mean, I saw scenes of the third one, I think. It was okay, but, yeah, I need to see at least the first one. I've seen only scenes, not the whole context. That's right. That's how I proposed to Sound Engraver. "Come here, woman." Yeah. Yeah, women do like yeah, Will Holloway, which means, like, hollow or something hollowed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Jim Nightshade and Will Holloway. Yeah. Still stands today as, like, one of my favorite stories. I should probably, like, send you guys off, like one of these streams, send you off with a collection of stuff I really do like as far as world buildings and stories, because I do read stuff that maybe I love or appreciate, or I like or appreciate, but man, some things just aren't impactful, like serrated in my brain to be forever as like my favorite stories. But something wicked this way comes is like I have to read it probably once every few years, because I like the story so much. It's great. Dr. Wise like, "Get a room, you 2." Oh, wait, never mind. Okay, so Samuel Proctor is, oh, and Ghost Planet is, talking about the 1902 public domain film. Okay, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Trip to the Moon, you've probably seen an image of the moon with a face and the rocket sticking out of his eye. Okay, thank you for that confirmation. Silent film. Okay, thanks. The 1902 silent film. Yeah, I probably should watch silent films too. But anyway, that's it. That's all I had to say, with the character interiority. Um, it's people I've heard, I have heard, around the YouTube sphere that and I think it's true to some extent, where people are like, if you have to skip one or the other, skip prose and go to dialogue because people read dialogue. I will say from my own experience though, I have to I like the prose. I like the narration, whatever form that looks like. So if it's the person's perspective or if it's coming from a narrator's perspective, um, I like it a lot. I tend to avoid it's not so much in classic fiction. This is more contemporary fiction where I'll look up um a new contemporary piece and it's mostly dialogue. And yeah, I'll give it this. It speeds up the reading experience and it speeds up the pace, but I feel like there could be there's so much more. You in a novel or a short story, you can work with the character's perspective that you sort of can with a play or a film, but not on the level you can with a good piece of fiction. Dr. Y says, I remember reading a fan story that was based on Disney's Jungle Book. It had an interesting inner struggle between the main character and the story's version of Koa. That's cool. Yeah, I love an inner struggle. I love the shadow character. I haven't well, I do have a character in mind that, a story I have already written many years ago. Yeah, well, I don't know. He's kind of a shady character anyway. So maybe he wouldn't be the candidate to not shady, but he's darker. He's like actually the story surprisingly it does involve two men and the the younger of the two is that light side persona and then the older of the two is the darker side. So maybe actually I'm working with the light and the shadow with the two men in my story. Kind of like in the same way with Will Holloway and Jim Nightshade. Of course, these men are much older, like they're in their mid 30s and mid 40s. So it's nothing like a coming of age. There wouldn't be little hints of coming of age or things like puberty or whatever. Um, anyway, let me continue on down. Let's see. Let's see. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Ghost Planet. George Millie, is that his name? Created the first sci-fi movie in 1902, A Trip to the Moon. And the first horror movie, The Devil's Haunted Castle, had a um, plastic skeletons on a rubber bat. That's cool. I wouldn't. Well, I mean, I think I could do horror in the way of Universal monsters or whatever, but nothing beyond that. I can't do horror. But yeah, I think that's everything. That's all I have to say about the character's interiority. So some tips for you writers out there or readers. I'm coming right now from a reader's perspective of what I'm seeing, and yeah, I mean that's one way to clean it up. Um, so anyhow, that's everything on looking on the dashboard. I guess as they say for uh, my YouTube channel. Well, first of all, I'm like under 90 people away from 3K, so I guess I'm gonna do a call to action. If you like what you hear on streams or videos, go ahead and like this video and subscribe. I would love to get to 3K this year. That would be a great goal. I love the number three. Three is a great number, so 3K would be great. Um, I I'm just in a zone right now, a creative zone with composing music and writing. So I really just don't have anything in the queue right now for separate videos. Uh, it's kind of funny. I don't know if YouTube is rewarding me for that, which is weird because YouTube likes videos more than live streams. Um, but I have been excuse me, I've been getting subscribers. I just and my channel I feel is like almost dormant. I love contributing to my channel, but I gotta I gotta be creative. I gotta work. I gotta write and compose. And the other thing too is I'm trying to. I love these live streams on popular art and commentary on writing and characters and stories and stuff. But it is its own separate thing. I really want to get back into making this a primarily music channel, maybe with some ideas on something like science fiction, which I love, but I think it's for the best that Sound Engraver, apart from the live streams, is a music channel. So I'm just kind of that's all on the back burner. So nothing within the week. But of course, live streams every Sunday. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. I think I'll leave it there. And until I see you next, keep producing, preserving, and promoting that great art you love and try to avoid the bad art. And I will see you next time.